to be a negotiated result to this conflict. Russia is not going to roll over Ukraine. That's almost certain.
To the world of business.
10% doesn't run a company. It's the power of his argument that's going to be more important than his actual vote.
This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our television and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Well, the outrage continues around the world to that evidence of alleged atrocities committed by Russian troops north of Kyiv over in Ukraine. And as a result, we have yet further sanctions being imposed, both by the United States and by Europe. To bring us up to speed on it all, we turn now to our Washington correspondent, Anne-Marie Hordern at the White House. So, Anne-Marie, start with the U.S. first. What are we doing in the U.S.?
So the United States, what we learned is they're going after the same kind of entities they have in the past. So similar strategy, but some new targets. So really going on full blocking sanctions on Sberbank, which is Russia's biggest bank, as well as Alfa Bank. But David, we should note, similar to the past, they are making in these full blocking sanctions carve-outs for the energy sector. And then when it comes to individuals close to President Putin, the United States is going to be sanctioning his 2 adult children. That would be Katerina and Maria, the 2 adult children that we know of. But we should know President Putin has gone to great lengths over the years to really guard them in a lot of secrecy. And then on top of that, there'll be an executive order on a ban of new investment going into Russia. So you could see there's still financial and economic penalties they are putting at the feet of the Kremlin.
Emma, you mentioned energy there. What about with Europe? Because we had some new news out of Europe. What about coal? What about oil? What about gas?
So when it comes to coal, the Europe plans are to go there to block coal and imports of Russian coal. Now, we should note, David, that on the one hand, this does put a crack in the ceiling of the energy realm that for many said it would be very hard for Russia to do. But Ursula von der Leyen outlined how much Russia makes off of European coal, sending that there. It's about $4 billion. This year alone, our calculation is Russia will bring in more than $320 billion, a third more of what they brought in last year when it comes to commodity sales. So then the big question is, will Europe ever move to block Russian oil and gas? You have 2 trains of thoughts even coming out. We heard them today. Charles Michel says at some point, sooner or later, oil and even gas will have to be on the table. But then you have the likes of Viktor Orban saying, Hungary will never go there, and they're even willing to pay in rubles.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that. That's quite a piece of news there, the possibility. Thank you so much to our Washington correspondent, Anne-Marie Hordern, reporting from the White House. We want to continue on that subject of energy and its role with respect to all of these sanctions being imposed. And for that, we turn to really a true expert in the area. He's Dan Yergin, Vice Chairman of S&P Global and the author of The New Map, Energy, Climate, and the Clash of Nations. Dan, great to have you back with us. Let's pick up on what Anne-Marie was just talking about. First of all, with respect to coal, I guess I'm a little surprised it's that big a number coming out of Russia. But give us a sense, can Europe replace that coal from other places? And by the way, what's going on with the market for coal? As I understand, there's actually increased demand for coal these days.
Yeah, demand for coal has been going up, and coal markets are tight, which is why actually the energy crisis that preceded Ukraine began with shortages of coal. But Russia is the biggest supplier of coal to Europe, but that's probably the easiest thing to stop and to pull in from other places.
So, Dan, what about the oil and gas side of it? As I understand, that's much harder potentially for Europe to substitute oil and gas from other sources. What are the prospects for that over the next year to 18 months?
David, as you said, it is much harder. And that's why oil and gas and energy was really carved out of the sanctions initially. But what started to happen is you've had self-sanctioning. And we think out of the maybe 4 million barrels a day of oil and product that gets exported to Europe, about half of that has been self-sanctioned, disrupted in some way. The million barrels a day from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserves helps balance some of that out. But I think the pressure is going to grow on oil, although, as you said, Orban will oppose it. But I think given what's happening, the toughest one to deal with is natural gas, because there's just not that much, although U.S. LNG has been a very welcome addition to European energy supplies.
We're all concerned about what this does to Europe and its ability to get access to energy. What does it do to Russia and its position as really a dominant supplier of energy over the years?
Well, Russia has been, although Putin once said he didn't like the term an energy superpower, he liked the money and he liked the political clout that comes from it. I think its days are ending as an energy superpower because the Europeans have basically said we're done. We don't regard Russia anymore as a reliable supplier. Their oil and gas is unwanted. It's going to take time to unwind that. So Russia will continue to be a major producer, but it will be a reduced energy power. And right now it's making a lot of money because prices are high. But its market for European gas over the next couple of years is really going to shrink.
Is the natural gas situation, I'm getting a question right now as we talk from a viewer, is it very different from natural gas? Because there is no strategic petroleum reserve for natural gas.
Right, exactly. And reserves are gas. The sort of storage is low, and their problem is to build it up for next year. So that's why gas is the biggest problem. And that if you start to have it disrupted, either because people don't want to buy it, or Putin says you have to pay in rubles, and the West Europe's not going to pay him in rubles, then you're going to see industry shutting down. You'll see prices going up. And we were just looking at that this morning. And what it also does is it means that the macroeconomic forecast will have to be lowered because economic activity will be lower. So Putin knows that he has leverage, but it is declining leverage over time. And obviously, his assumption that the Europeans would just salute a conquest of Ukraine has just turned out to be completely wrong, because he thought they would do that because of their dependence on Russian energy. Right now, they want to get out of Russian energy as quickly as they can. As you say, gas is the biggest problem. Oil is a problem, but gas is bigger.
Well, speaking of oil and gas, but really oil, it's on the agenda on Capitol Hill, as you know well, Dan, today, with those oil executives being summoned in, sort of almost to the principal's office, and asked to respond to the profits they're making, because they all are making lots of profits. What about this move to perhaps tax windfall profits? Once again, we've heard this before.
Yes, well, we've been there before. What they seem to have forgotten is that you had two price collapses, and the industry really retrenched, laid off a lot of people. Right now, it's making money. It's a cyclical industry. But this is, obviously the Congress people have to respond to their constituents. High gasoline prices are hurting people. But this is the result of basically, more than anything else, Putin and what's happening there. But this is a ritual of American politics. Big oil. This morning, I was looking back in the pages of the prize and found that the first hearing on high gasoline prices was 99 years ago in the Senate, and prices went up, and then guess what? They went down. But the script is very familiar.
So, Dan, we always want to ask you, what are your projections at this point for the price of oil going through the rest of the year? At one point, you said you think it's to 120. Do you think we're headed there again?
Well, I think, there's always the question, what's going to be the wild card here? Is COVID in China going to really sort of slow down that economy and reduce demand, which would actually take the pressure off the price? But if not, I think we are going to be in a tight oil market, and particularly in a disrupted oil market, which is what makes it more imperative not to have this political antagonism that we have in this country, but we need a kind of close collaboration and cooperation between government and industry, as we've had in previous oil crises going back to 1956 and the Suez Crisis, even to World War II. This crisis could turn into an emergency. Therefore, managing together on a daily basis is what's going to be really needed to manage the logistics of supply around the world as this continues.
How bad is it? I mean, we've been through some energy crises before. Certainly, you and I both remember the 1970s. How does it compare?
Obviously, the one people go back to is the 1970s as the most severe. I think this potentially is worse because it involves not only oil, but it involves natural gas, involves coal, and it involves two countries that happen to be the nuclear superpowers. So the risks are as high as they seemed in the 1970s. The risks right now are higher.
Okay, Dan, it's always such a pleasure to have you with us. That's Dan Yergin of S&P Global. Coming up here, Fed Minutes out in less than 2 hours from right now. We're going to go over what to expect with Sarah House. She's senior economist from Wells Fargo. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We want to keep you up to date with news from all around the world. And for that, we go to The First Word with Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. The U.S. Justice Department is charging a Russian businessman with allegedly violating sanctions against the country. At a news conference today, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland had this message for anyone else who is enabling Vladimir Putin's regime.
It does not matter how far you sail your yacht. It does not matter how well you conceal your assets. It does not matter how cleverly you write your malware or hide your online activity. The Justice Department will use every available tool to find you, disrupt your plots, and hold you accountable.
Attorney General Garland added the United States had seized millions of dollars from an account traced to the Russian tycoon and disrupted a cybercrime operation run by Russia. The U.S. will impose new sanctions on Russia, including penalties on two of its largest banks and on President Putin's adult children. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's wife and daughter will also be sanctioned. It's the latest step in efforts by the U.S. and its allies to crack down on people close to the Russian leader over allegations of atrocities in Ukraine by Russian forces. Russia denies the accusations. A panel of COVID experts is meeting today to discuss how and when to update vaccines for future variants. Until now, the process has been driven by vaccine makers Pfizer and Moderna. This meeting of Food and Drug Administration advisors should offer the first hints of a strategy for developing strain-specific boosters, and it probably won't be the last. Many scientists think the vaccines will need to be updated periodically, much like the flu shot. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thank you so very much, Mark. Well, the big news, of course, in the markets this week so far has been the bond market, where whatever the bond rally was, it's gone away at the moment, in part in anticipation of what the Fed is likely to do with rates, but also with the balance sheet. To give us a sense of the upcoming FOMC minutes that we're going to have just a short time from now, we welcome now Sarah House. She's senior economist at Wells Fargo. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with those minutes. People, I think, are really fixated on the balance sheet, and we did hear from Lael Brainerd from the Fed just yesterday suggesting they may be really running off that balance sheet faster than we thought.
Right. So we saw with the January meeting, the Fed lay out the principles of balance sheet reduction, talking about how the Fed funds rate is still going to be the primary tool. The balance sheet's going to shrink in a predictable manner. And eventually they want to get that composition to primarily be treasuries. But we're really missing some of the details around what that shrinkage might look like. And we saw Powell hint that those details could come with the meeting minutes from March. And we saw that reinforced by Brainerd.
So give us some sense as an economist of the relative effects on the economy, on financial conditions for that matter, of the runoff of the balance sheet on the one hand and raising rates on the other.
Well, I think the Fed has a better grasp on the impact of the Fed funds rate on financial conditions versus the balance sheet. But I think they're looking at financial conditions as a whole. So obviously, given the balance sheet of roughly $9 trillion, that's still very supportive of overall financial conditions. And because of the overall strength of the U.S. economy right now and just that sheer size of the balance sheet, they're really pointing towards shrinking it much faster than what we saw over the last cycle. So, for example, our expectations heading into the minutes are that eventually we'll see caps of up to $100 billion between treasuries and MBS, which is about twice as much as what the caps were in the last cycle, but also the phase-in be faster. So right now we're penciling in 6 months versus 12 months, but I think we'll get more clarity coming out of that in the minutes of just how much faster that roll-off will be.
Sarah, as you look at that roll-off, what sort of analysis do you have around the way they roll it off? Because you mentioned they have treasuries and they have the mortgage-backed securities, the MBS, so to speak. It may be quite different, right, if they really want to come out fast, because one could disrupt the mortgage market in a way that I think they have a fair amount of flexibility in just letting the treasuries mature.
Right. So of course the MBS roll-off is very, very dependent on how fast those mortgages are paid back. And so it seems that there's a lot more appetite for eventually selling mortgage-backed securities from the portfolio. Now, they're not going to get to that straight away. I think they will let that start to just roll off, particularly as those caps get phased in, but it does stand to be slightly different in terms of that composition, where I think they are more eager to shrink that MBS side of the portfolio more so than treasuries compared to the 2017-2019 runoff period.
So Sarah, give us your take on the yield curve right now. There's an awful lot of discussion of the yield curve. It inverted there on Friday when we get the news out of jobs. Where is the yield curve right now, and how good an indicator do you think that is of a possible recession?
Right. So, of course, it depends what part of the yield curve you're looking at. So we've seen the 2s, 10s move back positive, essentially uninvert from what we saw last week. But I think overall, when we step back and we look at the signal coming from the yield curve, it's not as good as it was historically, in part because those Fed purchases had such a big effect on yield. So the yield curve has become unduly flat because of those purchases. And so we're not getting the same signal as far as a recession from it than we have prior to QE.
Sarah, economists like you are quick to say yield curve's relevant. It's one point of data we should take a look at, but it's not the only one. As you look at all the data, what are your projections right now about a recession? We had Deutsche Bank come out today, I'm sure you know, and saying they think that we'll have a recession in the United States by the end of next year, 2023.
So we think the recession risks are more elevated in the current period than they are in the typical part of an expansion. So we estimate the chance of the economy slipping into recession between now and the end of 2023 at roughly 30%. But I think it's important to not just think of a recession in terms of binary terms, but also what happens to growth overall. So we're looking for a significant slowdown in growth. So not necessarily a recession, but still notable weakening in activity. That could be painful for a lot of businesses, even if we don't slip into a technical recession.
Yeah, a really good point. Short of recession, you can still have a lot of pain in the economy. But taking the flip side of that as well, not all recessions are created equal. There are some that are deeper and longer, some that are shallower and don't last quite as long. What, if any, can the Fed be doing right now to try to get the latter kind, that is a shallow, quick recession?
Well, I think there are some positives heading into this period of tightening, and a lot of that comes down to the strength of corporate and household balance sheets. And so I think that does give some wherewithal to withstand somewhat higher rates. But while we're starting at a good place, of course, that position is going to deteriorate the higher rates go. So already we're seeing the income dynamics in the household sector weakening. We've seen real income decline for 7 straight months. And so it's certainly not an easy position for the Fed. And I think a lot of things have to go right for them to wring out inflation without tipping the economy into recession. So we need to see things like the mix of spending be better balanced, where it's tampering down things like goods inflation without completely crimping consumer spending. We need to see workers come back into the labor force to help keep labor income rising, but maybe take some of those wage pressures off that are contributing to inflation right now.
I wanted to ask you about the workers specifically because, as you say, we need to wring the inflation out of the economy. I wonder what kind of pain we have to endure to do that. We had Bill Dudley, the former New York Fed president, earlier today on Bloomberg saying, look, we need some pain in the equities, essentially. We have to see this come down more in asset classes. What about unemployment? Can we wring out the inflation without increasing unemployment?
Well, that's going to be a really tough thing to do if we're actually trying to essentially get resources growing faster than demand. That includes labor supply. So it's going to be a tricky line to walk. I think there is scope for the labor force participation to improve further. And so that can help tamp down unit labor costs. So that's essentially the inflationary component coming from the labor market. But I think the fact that the Fed's projections are essentially still showing growth above potential, no real pain in the labor market still looks pretty rosy in my view.
Okay, Sarah, always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much for your time. That's Sarah House of Wells Fargo. Still to come, Senator Rick Scott of Florida on Ukraine and his state's battle with Disney. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
More in Ukraine rages on.
President Putin's invasion is brutal.
Turn to Bloomberg for up-to-the-minute reporting from around the world and analysis of what it all means to you.
The intention here is to increase the pressure on the sanctions front.
I think the United States policy is that the sanctions continue until President Putin is no longer there.
For continuing coverage from Ukraine and around the world, keep it tuned to Bloomberg Television and Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David West. We're going to check on the markets now, which are moving, particularly the equities, because in part, I think, of what's going on with the bond market. And we have K.L.P Gupta here to take us through exactly what the markets are doing. So help us.
Yeah, it's a risk-off day regardless of what asset class you look like. Bonds are selling off, the stock market's selling off, but really you nailed it. It really is all about what's happening in the bond dynamic right now. And it's coming down to a lot of pressure ahead of these FOMC minutes that you just discussed with your previous guest at, I believe, 2 o'clock. The big focus right now is going to be not just about rate hikes, but about the balance sheet. It comes down to how much of shrinkage in the balance sheet actually translates to an additional, essentially, 25 basis point cut in terms of the impact that it actually has, in addition to potentially putting 50 basis points on the table. So it's that discussion and the lack of clarity around how that shrinkage actually happens that's really spooking the bond market and, in turn, spooking the stock market. You have the NASDAQ down a whopping 2.7%. And remember, when yields jump by this much as 17 basis points yesterday, as much as 10 basis points earlier in the session today, that margin of the move is really what knocks tech off of its game, as opposed to just 3 or 4 basis points. So
you make a really important point, I think, which is we think that the Fed knows what it's doing when raising rates. It's not as clear on the balance sheet. We don't have as much experience with that.
Right, because there's two ways that can happen, right? You can very clearly just not reinvest the funds that come on to your balance sheet, or you can actively sell bonds on the open market. And that's really what's kind of freaking the markets out right now, because in some ways, the markets are encouraging the Fed to make the asset prices come back down to earth. And to do that, it means you are able to potentially justify a more violent, for lack of a better term, shrinkage of the balance sheet, which would include selling bonds on the open market. In
the meantime, we have a fair amount of news on oil today. We had inventories, and of course, we have that testimony going on up on Capitol Hill.
The testimony getting a lot of attention because we know this is a very sore topic when it comes to the debate about whether or not oil companies are, as the Biden administration puts it, racketeering profits and really holding on to them and not able to serve the consumer. But a lot of what the testimony has, and I'll share a little nugget with you here, is some of these major oil executives, what they're saying is, yeah, we are making record profits in 2021, but they are following some pretty big declines in 2020, which comes back to the core of the issue. Darren Woods, the CEO of ExxonMobil, he came out and said, yeah, we made $23 billion in 2021, but we lost $22 billion in 2020. So the core of the issue here really comes down to they're still ramping up from these COVID issues. And on top of that, they're trying to meet this demand. It also takes 12 to 18 months to invest and to ramp up production. So do you make that investment right now?
Yeah, and this is far from the first time that we've seen Congress go after oil companies. Thank you so much to K.L.P Gupta. Coming up, we're going to talk with Senator Rick Scott about what's next for Ukraine, the direction of his Republican Party, and his state's fight with Disney. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David West, and to catch you up on news from all around the world, we're going to go now to Mark Crumpton with the first word.
David, thank you. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia hasn't given up its plans to occupy the entire country. President Zelensky addressed the Irish Parliament today as some Russian troops pulled back from near Kyiv to focus on eastern Ukraine. Zelensky told the lawmakers that 10 million Ukrainians have been left without shelter as a result of the war. In Peru, President Pedro Castillo lifted a lockdown that he had imposed on Lima in an attempt to curb violent protests against soaring inflation. Many congressional leaders in Peru had urged the president to lift the lockdown, saying the measure restricted fundamental rights. Even as he met with lawmakers, a protest rally near Congress turned violent, with demonstrators battling police who fought back with tear gas. Emmanuel Macron is spending the final week before France's presidential election trying to connect with voters through enough campaign stops and media appearances. Polls show the gap between him and far-right leader Marine Le Pen narrowing. President Macron has been criticized for not campaigning enough. The latest surveys show Macron would beat Le Pen by 53% to 47% in a runoff. That gap, based on an average compiled by Bloomberg, has more than halved from a month ago. Some Republican governors in the United States may be getting a midterm campaign boost from the same Biden administration aid they attacked just a year ago. Governors from both sides of the aisle are tapping into $200 billion in pandemic relief from President Biden's American Rescue Plan. Florida's Ron DeSantis, considered a leading 2024 presidential candidate, has repeatedly called it Washington at its worst. But his administration alone has doled out more than $5 billion of that money so far. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
All eyes continue to fasten on Ukraine as the atrocities are documented north of Kyiv. And we know how the Ukrainian people are doing. They're going through a horrible situation, although, in fairness, they are doing much better than people would have expected at this point. So we want to ask now how we're doing in supporting them. And for that, we turn to Senator Rick Scott. He's a Republican of Florida and a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. So, Senator, thank you so much for being back with us. How are we, and by we, I mean the United States and our allies, how are we doing in supporting the Ukrainians?
Sure. I think the one thing that's really important is we all need to make sure we're all calling Putin what he is. He's a war criminal. He needs to be in prison the rest of his life. And we've got to do everything we can to hold Russia accountable through sanctions of Putin and anybody around him to make sure that he's held accountable. On our side, what we've got to do ourselves and our allies, we've got to keep showing up and give Ukraine every lethal weapon we can to make sure they can defeat, not to stop, they need to defeat the Russian military, and the Russian military needs to be walking back into Russia completely demolished. That's what has to happen here. So I'm still surprised the Biden administration hasn't given them the Polish MiGs that the Ukrainian military could use. And we just got to keep pushing every day to get everything we can to them. And we need to expect our allies to be doing the exact same thing.
Part of the strategy is to impose really crippling sanctions. People want them to be crippled, at least on Russia. Part of that has to do with oil and gas for Europe. We've cut it off, but obviously Europe, and particularly Germany, is much more dependent on it. Is there anything we in the United States can do in the short term to try to supply them enough so that they could cut off those supplies?
Well, we've got to boost our production. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has it out for our oil and gas industry. It's difficult to get a permit. They shut down the Keystone Pipeline. We've got to open the Keystone Pipeline. We've got to get the permits as long as it's safe, as long as our government agencies do it in a respectful manner, to where things can be drilled safely in our country, because we want to be independent. We all want to be independent as individuals. Our country has to be, and that way we can help our allies like Europe right now, where they make sure they don't long-term stay dependent on Russia. Because if Putin can defeat Ukraine, he's not going to stop there. Then he's going to be in Poland and other countries, and we're going to be we're going to have our men and women at war. So we've got to become energy independent, so we're not dependent on Russia for anything.
Senator, I want to turn to something you sent out a short time ago, which is the 11-point plan to rescue America, as you put it, a brochure really setting out 11 points. We don't have time to go through all 11 points, but part of it is fiscal responsibility. And I wonder what we can do in this country to become more fiscally responsible. You just heard the news report about the extent to which all the states were giving a lot of money because of the pandemic relief, including your home state. And we just heard about your Governor DeSantis deploying a fair amount of that money. Can't blame him. He got the money. Why not spend it? But what is your reaction? Did we do the states a favor by distributing that money during the pandemic?
No. I mean, what every responsible state and local official should do is they should say, hey, I'm going to send that money back. We need to pay down this $30 trillion worth of debt. We can't waste money. You know, when you individually get money, you don't go waste it. We got to go spend money responsibly. If there's something that we need to do to deal with the COVID crisis, I get it. But just sending money to states that they can spend basically any way they want, or to local governments, makes no sense. Somebody's going to pay that money back. Whenever the federal government spends money, somebody's taxes have to go up to pay for this. I mean, think about what's happened in our federal government. In the last 20 years, we've had a 16% increase in our population and a 300% increase in federal spending on an annual basis. That's not sustainable. That's why we have the inflation we have right now. That's why gas prices are up and food prices are up and housing prices have just skyrocketed. We have got to get control of this. We don't want to have the same problems they're having in other countries where this inflation has got completely out of control.
Inflation obviously is a very big problem across the country. I think everyone at this point admits to that, recognizes it. I want to come back to another issue in your home state of Florida, and that involves a new statute having to do with the education of young children and exposing them to things having to do with gender or sex. And obviously it's a big issue, and it's become a dividing point between, again, your state and Governor DeSantis on the one hand, and the Walt Disney Company. I used to work for him, full disclosure. I wasn't involved in any of this, but I used to work for them. I know them. Is this a sensible fight for them to be picking right now with one of the largest employers in the state?
You know, it's frustrating because I think all of us would agree that, you know, young children should not be talked about sex in the school. Parents should be the ones that talk to their children about sex. So I think that it's common sense that that's not what our schools should be doing. They should be reading, writing, and arithmetic. At the same time, I think companies have got to really think about how they're getting involved. They can care about the issues, but I mean, you know, there's a lot of now woke companies that are getting involved in issues here, but then they won't do the same thing in communist China. You've got Disney as an example, which I think all of us have enjoyed going to Disney in our lifetime, but one of their last movies they shot in where they have slave labor. They got in Xinjiang, and they promoted the fact that it was shot there, and that's where the Uyghurs are in prison. So I think I'm always appreciative people. We have a right to speak and say whatever we want, but let's be consistent. If we're going to talk about things in America, let's talk about things in communist China also.
But I want to come back to that question of, is it the most important issue we have in front of us right now? I mean, we may have our own views about, as parents, about how we want our children raised. Is there evidence actually that small children are being injured by this? Was there a lot of discussion in the Florida schools about gender for second graders?
My understanding is, parents had complained about some of the things that were taught in some of the school districts. So I think that's why the bill was passed. What's frustrating is that why can't teachers and our educators focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic and not talk about ideology? And then why can't companies focus on just doing the job for their consumers? So that's what ought to happen in this country. We ought to get back to doing the basics.
So let me come back to some of the basics and come back to inflation, which you mentioned is a very big issue. Give us a sense of what you think should be done right now for inflation. Whatever money was appropriated, was spent, including your home state did take the money, is spending it. That's sort of water under the bridge. What should be done now?
Stop spending. So we shouldn't send more money out. It's not needed. I mean, the COVID crisis is basically over. So let's stop spending money. Let's get back to living within our means. Right now, Biden's budget projects we'll take the federal debt to $45 trillion. $45 trillion in the next 10 years. I don't know how we're going to pay off the $30 trillion. And what you're already seeing what's happening to interest rates. Think of what that's going to do to mortgage rates and what that's going to do ultimately to housing prices. So we have got to get this under control, and everybody's responsible because it's our money. It's not. There's no free money. The government doesn't have it. So some business that's making a big profit off of. The only way they get any money is they have to tax us. So this money that's going to get sent out to states, the states ought to say, we don't need the money. Send it back. Send it back and let's pay down the debt. Don't waste the money. That's how we're going to get this inflation under control, by doing things like that.
Senator, I'm going to apologize to you because I never do this, but I had a viewer write in a question, actually, and I want to ask it on behalf of the viewer. And it goes back to Disney, I'm afraid, so I'm doubling back on you. I apologize.
Sure.
As you and I both know, the Disney theme park down in Orlando has special status, essentially almost a quasi-governmental entity. And there have been good reasons for that. It's gotten a lot of money for the state. Should that be under review? You know,
when I was governor, it never was an issue. I think Disney has been a responsible corporate citizen. I don't understand why they now are getting involved in some of these political issues, but so I know that my understanding is the legislature is going to look at it now, but my experience with Disney had been positive.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your indulgence on that. That is Senator Rick Scott. He's Republican of Florida. Always good to have you with us, Senator. Coming up, we go to the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs for an update on a very different kind of space race with David Ray of SAIC. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The 37th Space Symposium is going on right now in Colorado Springs, where, as I understand it, a lot of people involved in space get together and compare notes. We're going to go to the Space Symposium right now, and Mr. David Ray, he's Senior Vice President of the Space Business Unit at SAIC. So, David, thank you so much for being with us. First of all, tell us what you all are doing out there.
First, thank you for having me, and I really am enjoying being here. We're at the Space Symposium. It's an annual event every year where we have the largest community of space professionals from the U.S. military and DoD and federal civil agencies, as well as international partners, and large companies as well as small companies, really moving the strategic agenda forward on how we're going to make advancements both in space exploration as well as space as a part of the military and DoD ecosystem. So it's very exciting times for us.
When you talk about that strategic vision and going forward, certainly over my lifetime, it's changed a lot. It used to be all government in the United States, all government. And now we see so much private. We see SpaceX launches. We cover them all the time right here on Bloomberg. A lot of privatization of space. What are the biggest developments we're seeing right now with respect to space?
I think you're seeing three main pillars that are starting to merge and integrate. The first is how space plays its role in the DoD and military ecosystem, how it also, from a federal civil standpoint, with NASA, drives the acceleration of space exploration. The second pillar is focused on commercial satellite operators. So think of communication satellites that make the digital economy work, that increase and enable our ability around internet and TV. And then the third piece, which is newer than the first two, is really the notion of space travel. All those are integrated, and we have to really be able to go build an infrastructure and understand how we're going to manage not only the traffic from a data perspective, but also the assets that live in space so that we can do all three efficiently and effective for our partners.
Well, let's talk about the stuff that's up there in space, because this is one thing that really grabbed me as I was reading for this, and you've been involved in this. How do we keep track of everything that's up there? I see 5,600 payloads, 18,000 objects, and 20,000 bits of debris. You've got something called Space Track to sort of keep track of it all. Mr. Ray, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Absolutely. There's a continuum of space traffic management. Some call it a space domain awareness. And the first step is knowing what's out there. Spacetrack.org is a system that we use where, as commercial companies and government entities launch things and objects into space, they register them with our system so that we at least know what's there. That is the first step in really being able to have effective space traffic management. I will say that's just the first piece. The pieces that we're moving towards now are also understanding how fast they're moving, how big they are, and then how do we navigate through that debris as we start to launch more satellites, as we start to launch humans into space when you think about space leisure travel, and also as we launch satellites to increase communications worldwide. Just a point of note, from 1999 to 2019, the International Space Station had to maneuver about 25 times to avoid debris in space. So that's a little more than 2 times a year. In 2020 alone, it had to maneuver 3. So we're expecting to see that increase because the amount of objects in space are going to increase. So it's becoming more imperative now that we have to understand what's up there, how we manage it, and how we navigate it so that we can be safe and advance our agenda with respect to space exploration.
I have a very basic understanding of this, but you have satellites, you have space stations, things like that, things you want up there. it seems there's an awful lot of things called debris or failed satellites and things. Are there any plans to go up and clean up part of space?
Absolutely. Just like here on Earth, when we're driving down the street, we have to build our roads. We have to paint our roads. We have to have gas stations so that we can continue to move our cars down the road. We have to have maintenance facilities to be able to make sure that they're up and running. We have to build that infrastructure in space. There are efforts underway to look at and understand how we can refuel satellites in space, because oftentimes satellites just stay up once they run out of gas, and so they don't have any more useful life after a certain time. We want to be able to reuse assets. And so really building the highways and byways in space, just like we have in the air with aircraft, just like we have on the road with cars, are really going to fuel, how we effectively manage it and how we effectively get the best and long-standing endurance out of the assets that we put up there.
Okay, really appreciate you being with us today, Mr. Ray. That's David Ray, Senior Vice President of the Space Business Unit at SAIC. Coming up, we've got a hot primary race for the Republican nomination for Senate out in Pennsylvania, and one of the candidates, somebody well known to Bloomberg, the former head of Bridgewater. We're going to talk about Dave McCormick next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. There's a barn burner of a primary building for the Republican nomination in the Pennsylvania Senate race, with several candidates and two with particularly strong name recognition. Mehmet Oz, strong name recognition with the afternoon TV viewing public, and Dave McCormick, name recognition with, let's be frank, Bloomberg audience, because he used to run Bridgewater. Joshua Green, national correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek, has written a big take on McCormick, and we welcome him now. So, Josh, terrific piece of reportage here. So give us your take on what Dave McCormick is doing to try to get that nomination.
Well, basically, I think this is the most interesting and important Senate race in the country because you have Dave McCormick, the former CEO of Bridgewater, world's biggest hedge fund, running against TV personality Dr. Oz. So I went and embedded with both of them for a little while campaigning. And what's striking to people about David McCormick is that he has transformed almost overnight from a kind of Davos-friendly Wall Street type Republican to an anti-immigration, Trump acolyte, MAGA figure. It's been a quicker and more rapid transition politically than anything I've ever seen before. But the upshot is that it's winning and that both candidates are running this kind of America First race because they're trying to tout their allegiance to Donald Trump. And that really is still the currency that Republican politicians need to have in a Republican primary.
So, Josh, let me ask you about the transformation part of it, because full disclosure, your piece, which is very compelling, starts with an event that I was at. It was celebrating Dave McCormick's marriage to Dina Powell of Goldman Sachs, and Ray Dalio gave a speech. I was there. A lot of people were. But I've known Dave for a while, and I've never had any illusion that he's not a conservative. I mean, this was not some liberal that's moved all the way over. I'm just not sure he really addressed a lot of those issues before because he wasn't called upon to.
Yeah, well, in speaking to his former Bridgewater colleagues, I think the shock was more stylistic. Not that they were surprised that he was a Republican. Of course, the CEO of a big hedge fund is likely to be a Republican. But he transformed so quickly. I describe it as Clark Kent in a phone booth, from wearing a suit to wearing camouflage in railing against woke liberalism. This is a guy that won a diversity and inclusion award at Bridgewater just last fall. The real thing that got to me, though, is that McCormick has become sort of the favorite of Breitbart News, the notorious right-wing website. I'm sure you remember, David, 5 years ago, Robert Mercer got basically drummed out of Renaissance Technology for his associations with Breitbart. But one of the interesting things is that McCormick really hasn't. Nobody on Wall Street has batted an eye. So I think that goes a long way toward explaining or showing how much the business world has embraced Trump and Trumpism. And the fact that a guy as credentialed and serious as McCormick is willing to kind of bend the knee to Trump in this way, shows that he remains the dominant figure in the Republican Party.
Well, let me just ask about that, bending the knee to Trump. How much of this is bending the knee, as you put it, to the person of Donald J. Trump, and how much of it is accepting some of Trump's positions? Because a lot of people I talk to on Wall Street think Trump had some issues very much right with respect to China. By the way, with respect to taking natural gas for Germany from Nord Stream 2, that you can divorce, can't you, the person of Trump from some of the positions he took?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing with McCormick is, Bridgewater and Ray Dalio are famous for their investments in China. And that's something that McCormick, as CEO, oversaw for years. One of the rapid transformation points I was talking about in the piece is that almost overnight, he reinvented himself as this anti-China figure because, again, as you said, that's something that appeals to Donald Trump and Donald Trump voters. And I think those are the people he's trying to win over as he competes with Dr. Oz.
Yeah, it's a fascinating race. As I say, two fairly charismatic people with a lot of name recognition. It's going to be a really great race to follow. Thank you so much for being with us, Josh. Great piece, as I said. He's national correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek. Check out the Balance of Power on newsletter on the terminal and online. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we're going to talk to Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. We're going to ask him, among other things, do we need that fourth booster shot if we already have 3? And what's coming up in the fall? This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hello and welcome back to Under Review. It has been a while since we've last talked to you guys. We still have nothing. It's over.
We lost.
That's a good intro. And let's get into it. Okay. Welcome back to Under Review. Lots has happened since we've last talked to you, so we are going to dive into some of that tournament play, round of 16, 8, that Final Four and national championship game. But before we get to it, I'm Breman.
And I'm Grant Mangle. Let's get into it.
Although it feels like ages ago, that round of 16 game was not too long ago, facing Indiana, and the Huskies got away pretty simple for a March Madness game. Then they moved on to the much tougher competitor. That was NC State, who won off of Notre Dame with Reina Perez with the steal, and you could tell by that game that neither team wanted to go home. An absolute double overtime thriller, and that's what got us into that Final Four national championship. Sadly, we lost a key element to our team right before heading to Minnesota, and that was Dorka Juhas, as she got injured on her wrist during the NC State game. How do you think this kind of impacted the team going into Minnesota in any of those games?
I mean, before that even, it clearly impacted them during the NC State game. UConn was up 9 points at the time when Dorka, or 7 or 9 at the time when Dorka went down, and you could see the team was visibly shaken right there. I mean, the team was coming over to the bench crying, and it was a pretty nasty, gruesome kind of, dislocation, fracture, injury. And so that made that game a lot more difficult, double overtime then, all that stuff happened. But they get through it, and then going into Minnesota, you're missing your sixth man, you're big off the bench, and that just makes it a lot harder on us when we've got Aaliyah and Olivia Nelson-Ododa, who tend to get into foul trouble more often than not. And when you need that third big to be able to come in and not have it, it kind of just changes how you play the game completely.
I think that Dorka Yuha's injury was just absolutely heartbreaking, especially at that point in time. She's worked all year. She had to deal with a slight injury during the year. She transferred here. She kind of found her way in super quickly, and it's just tough to have to miss out on championship weekend, but some good came out of it as she announced that she was coming back and she's going to be essential for next year. But I do agree with the fact that it did play a large role in that big rotation, because Olivia and Aaliyah are the big foulers, and we saw it in a lot of the games, especially going into those Stanford and South Carolina games. So after they escaped NC State, they faced Stanford. I think that NC State game kind of showed what our team could do, and I think it kind of scared those other Final Four teams, because either of those teams really left it all on the court, and to be able to work that hard, go into that many overtimes, and just the shot for shot for shot for shot, it really showed the high level that you can play at and how competitive our team was. So I think going off of that high into the tournament was good. And then we got into that Stanford game. Any initial thoughts?
That was an absolute war between us and Stanford. You know, Gino and Tara, two of the best coaches ever to do it. They don't love each other, but they got great respect for each other. They know the ins and outs of each other's teams and how they like to play. So it was always going to be a close game coming in. You know, Stanford, #1 overall seed, defending champion. Us, a #2 seed, looking to get back to the glory. It never really felt like a game that UConn should lose. It felt like they were in control from the start, and although it never really got to double digits or anything like that, it was always close, always tight, but to me it never felt in doubt, and UConn was the better team on the court that night, and overall, I believe.
I completely agree. I think that Stanford's just a very similar team to us in their way of play and who they have. They're guard heavy. They got the Hall sisters, you got Haley Jones, and then you got Cameron Brink down low, which is very similar to our own Olivia Nelson-Ododa. So they definitely brought an equal amount of competition, but they just weren't on their mark as they have been in, per se, last year, their championship game. And I think that we really brought a lot of intensity and a good amount of play, especially Avina Westbrook, 3 after 3. When Avina starts going, you just can't stop her. You remember that early stretch she had in the South Carolina first game this year. She can be electric, and she really does change momentum on the court.
Absolutely. I mean, when she's on, like you said, she's on, and she stepped onto the court and looked confident and like the Avina Westbrook that we knew she could be coming into the season, what we saw last season, all of that. She really was a spark that she helped us not only get the lead early, but kind of grow it eventually and to make it a 6-point game, a 7-point game, and really give us a little bit of breathing room when that was definitely something we needed.
Everyone did pretty well too. Paige Easy, we had so many good contributions that game that it didn't have me that fearful going into our second matchup with South Carolina, although South Carolina escaped Louisville pretty easily for a March Madness game, so it didn't really show what the result of our second matchup could be, especially with it having been canceled in January. It was the game everyone wanted, so there was a lot of anticipation for it, and then we entered the national championship. Any initial thoughts on that?
I mean, the big thing that sticks out to me is the first quarter. You get down 22-8 at the end of the first. You give yourself a 14-point hole against who is the best team in the country all year long, and yeah, there was a handful of times where we cut it back down to 6, we cut it back down to 5, stuff like that happened, but you spend so much energy getting just that close that when they get a little burst, it just pushes you back out, and you just can't get over that hump, and you can't beat yourself against a good team like that. Getting absolutely dominated on the glass and then just turning the ball over more than 20 times. Those things just aren't a recipe to win, especially when you're going up against the best competition in the country. And not to mention, we couldn't make a 3, and that's what it came down to. We couldn't shoot and we couldn't rebound, and that's why we lost by 15.
We were down by just enough that it wasn't able to get competitive to a point where we thought we could win. Even in those third and fourth quarters, you kind of saw it on our players. They were kind of like, what can we do at this point? They were almost losing hope. They wanted to win that game. it just didn't match up how it should have. Kristen Williams, a usual extremely dominant tournament player, had not a lot of points. And then we kind of saw a couple surprises. Him subbing Amari DeBarian in the first half, personally, I thought was a great move. Definitely threw Dawn Staley, as she might have not had that in her scouting report. And then throwing Caroline Ducharme in there for some extended minutes, which I thought was a great idea because she knows how to step up in those times. Obviously, we weren't able to pull away a win, but I think that she contributed a lot, although she did foul out. She stepped up against big competition, and she wasn't in during that first South Carolina game.
Yeah, the Amari DeBerry entrance into the game definitely shocked me a little bit, but that's a product of Dorka not being healthy. If we have Dorka, those are her minutes, and I mean, she gets more than just the 2 or 3 minutes that Amari played, and she would have at this point, a better impact than Amari did too. I mean, when Dorka went out, she was playing, like Gino said, that was her best stretch of the year right there, right? In that NC State game, she looked terrific, and I think we really could have used her against Aaliyah Boston down low, especially when we get out-rebounded how we did. And then Caroline, yeah, it was a great decision to put her in, I thought. I mean, really spaced the court out, and we know she can score, and when we were struggling to score, why not throw that in there? Someone who can hit threes, backdoor cuts, get down in the lane, and have tough finishes inside. I thought it was a really good move, and she ended up with, 7, 9 points herself, and one of the leading scorers on her team in the game. So it was really nice to see her get back to herself a little bit.
And as well as not having Kristen really there, we didn't have AZ, had food poisoning, the most unlucky thing to get before the national championship. And they said Liv was even dealing with her hip, and then Avina rolls her ankle mid-game. Honestly, though, I couldn't attribute all those things to the reason we had that loss, as our teams dealt with adversity after adversity, so we know how to power through those things, and just not enough people were on that night. And South Carolina was on. Just a well-oiled machine. Destiny Henderson dropping 26 points. Aaliyah Boston barely were fouling, so it was just a recipe for success for them.
Yeah, I mean, they were the better team on that night, and like you said, even if AZ doesn't have food poisoning, lives at 100% on that night, I don't know if we still beat them at that point, honestly. Sure, AZ can get hot from 3 and totally change the game, but they were the better team that night. They deserve the national championship.
I think that game could play out so many different ways, and it will for the next couple years. And I think it's tough that it had to end like that, because that's the thing with March Madness. Only one team ends up happy. But if you kind of look back at our entire season and see that accomplishment, I think that is very important to recognize out of this team. We've mentioned adversity time and time again, but it is truly impressive how much they've been through and how much each of them individually improved. And we made it further than we did last year. And I think that's an accomplishment in itself. I know Paige had that quote that was heartbreaking. That was, at UConn, it's national championship or nothing. And although that is the mentality and they have these Stewie reputation to live up to, I think that they should be proud of how much they did accomplish this year.
Yeah, going into the season, it definitely was national championship or bust. I mean, that's the view that this program always has. But once you start to see how the season plays out, all the injuries, the COVID, everything that this team faced, no, this was definitely a success of a season. They really left it all out there, getting to the Final Four, 14th straight year, the double overtime thrilling win there. That was incredible by itself. Beating the defending champions in Stanford to get to the national title game, another awesome win for the program. They definitely shouldn't be hanging their heads and feel disappointed, especially the seniors. They've had great careers here. Yes, they didn't get to their ultimate end goal, but they left the program in good hands, and it's still just a bright future for this team.
We are losing Kristen, Olivia, and Davina very soon, as the WNBA draft is Monday. They do not get a break at all, but they are such key contributions to this team. It's really upsetting to see them go, and my heart does break for them, as they do deserve a national championship, and it's tough because winning a college national championship is so different than a WNBA championship, and they have to move on so quickly, but I really do think they should be proud of all they accomplished here. And moving on to next year, we have new people, Aina Patterson, Azuna Brady, and honestly, I think we could get someone from the transfer portal.
Yeah, that's the way basketball is trending now. that people are unhappy with they don't get playing time. We saw it happen to our team this year. Saylor and Mir both left mid-season, which you don't see that too much, but there's plenty of people in the portal, plenty of new faces to bring into the program to help us win a championship, and most people still want to come play at UConn. It's a great program, great facilities. They're going to want to be a part of this. And going into next year, not only the new recruits, but we've got Amari staying on campus over the summer trying to improve her game. We'll have AZ, a full offseason healthy, trying to get her game up to her standard. Nika, we're going to need to see her try to push that offensive game forward a little bit more next year. Paige, year 3. I mean, it's going to be a very exciting time to be a UConn Husky fan.
It's crazy these sophomores felt like freshmen yesterday, and they're going to be the upperclassmen of next year. But I think with the lineup we have, I would like to see a transfer that's a forward, someone big down low. It's something we always need. I've heard a couple names thrown around a lot from Maryland, but I'd be interested to see who we get. I love Dorka now, and I think that she wasn't someone that everyone had on their list, but Gina really finds great people and who we really need to make this team better. But yeah, I'm hopeful looking into next year, and I'm pretty satisfied with how this year went.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, when you find Dorka, that's credit to the coaching staff and the scouting department to really do their due diligence and find who's going to fit this team and what role they can play. And I think that they can go replicate that again and find a key contributor for next year.
So the question I really had on my mind is, with such a strange, unpredictable season, looking back at maybe our first episode or even before the season started, what do you think would be the most surprising thing about this season that you've come to learn that you wouldn't have believed then?
For me, I think it's Caroline Ducharme. I did have her as my freshman to watch out for coming into the season on the women's basketball preview, but I never imagined that she would come into a starting role and be the team's leading scorer for a handful of games this year. She really carried us through that middle stretch when we only had 5, 6, 7 players available. She held the team together. And the reason we were a 2 seed and had a chance to play in Bridgeport is because of her. And I never would have guessed that coming into the season.
She was definitely under the radar. She said it multiple times herself. But I think we can never forget how much Caroline did for us in those times that we were at our lowest. She stepped up more than you could ever imagine. And that's just a notable effort that will definitely impact how she does in the coming years. We could see it in that Big East Award, being named second team as a freshman. It's just really impressive, and I know she hasn't gotten those minutes in the past 4 to 5 games, but she definitely should not forget about that mid-season stretch. Personally, I don't think Nika Mule's performance surprised me, but I think it surprised many. There were comments before saying maybe Nika will transfer, maybe Nika won't get a lot of minutes, but Nika has a very important quality that's needed on the court. She changes the pace of the game, winning Big East Defensive Player of the Year. She just brings something that not a lot of other people do. I think Caroline almost has a similar energy. They're just very gritty. They get in there, and I'm just really proud with how Nika did this year.
Yeah, she definitely has a role on this team, and not only does she know what it is, she embraces it. She loves the role that she's in. I think that it's very crucial, like you said, to this team. She's the motor. She's the heart. It's something that we're going to need a little more of next year, a little more toughness, I think, too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to come next year. A lot of these players we didn't even get to see that much out of. Paige, only a couple games before the tournament. And then AZ only came back around like the DePaul game. So I think that once these players get a full season in, it's going to be unstoppable. But congratulations to South Carolina for the national championship win. And I'm excited for ours next year. But sadly, Grant will not be here as he is a graduating senior. So to all our Under Review fans, I know you're pretty upset that it might just be me, but I'll definitely see you next year. It's been a great season. So glad to be a part of it. Proud of the entire team and proud of the work we've done here at UCTV. So enjoy the off season. Take a break from all that basketball. But until the next time, I'm Breemon.
And I'm Grant Mangle. Thanks for watching.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
This is the FCB Radio Network, home of the best personalities and where real talk lives. Online at fcbradio.com. FCB.
What's going on? What's going on? This is your man, Jeff Brown, and we have tuned in. You have tuned in to another exciting episode of the Jeff Brown Show, and you already know what time it is. Listen, we getting ready to get into some hot topics, and we have had a phenomenal, this month, last month, last month. I know we're in April now, but man, we had a phenomenal slew of guests last month and the month before that. I mean, we just been on a roll. Next week we got because this is a political season, we got Mr. Lee Weingart, who is the Republican candidate for Cuyahoga County executive. I'm telling you, he's got some great gems. He's going to be dropping on the show next week, so make sure you guys tune in. But I got to introduce my partner in crime, my man, Reverend Do Wrong himself, Mr. Darby Morrow, handling his business over there. We call him AKA Mr. Liberty. He definitely is proud of his alma mater. So we appreciate that. Right. Yeah, we know what they do over there too.
Whatever.
The Falwells, they kicking it over there, man.
Whatever. I am proud of my alma mater, but I'm not Reverend Do Wrong. I'm not as doing wrong like the people we about to talk about are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. First of all, let's talk about the Grammys real quick. Big shout out to a lot of the winners of the Grammys. I'm telling you, man. I thought, it was good look, good to see some diversity at the Grammys. I don't know if you tuned in or not, but man, it was a lot of awards handed out. Silk Sonic, they did their thing as well.
Okay.
Hey, they won the best song, best album of the year, I believe. They just killed it, man. I mean, Bruno Mars. I mean, he's an exceptional talent within himself. And you know what? I'm gonna tell you at the Grammys, man, who I was really, really impressed with, man. Who I've become to be thoroughly impressed with now, man, for real. And I couldn't really get with this artist, but over time they've grown on me. And I think because of the growth that they're showing in their artistry is Lady Gaga. Yeah.
She's very talented. Like people wouldn't have expected this when she first came out, but like
because she came out, man. I thought she was mad. Woo! I thought about all kind of evil things when I seen that woman. You know what I'm saying? Not saying that she was an evil person, but she was kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say demonic, but it was just kind of weird, man. When she came out. Oh man, it was like, ugh.
Yeah.
But now she
has a lot of range.
She has a man. She's elegant. She has this elegant feel to herself, and she connected with Tony Bennett, and and doing those duets with him. And Tony Bennett, is one of my favorite, jazz singers. Him and Frank Sinatra,
classic dude.
Oh man, you know what I'm saying? My guy, Martin, Dean Martin. Just amazing, man. So for her to be able to really transcend into that and nail it and perform it, and now she's doing records with a lot of the songs and duets with Tony Bennett. And it's just dope, man. How she's really been able to readapt, and just change her brand. And guess what? The people that followed her in the beginning, she's introduced a lot of that generation that was following her to
like Tony Bennett and
Tony Bennett. And now, you look at that Frank Sinatra, Old Blue Eyes. It's like, man, this woman has really, I'm going to tell you another, man. Nas killed it yesterday too, man. I was very impressed with Nas.
He's in my top 5, dead or alive.
Hey, man, let me tell you something, man. You cannot talk about greatest hip hop artists without having Nas in that top 5, man.
No doubt. He's in my top 5.
And some will argue he might be on the same level as Jay-Z. They might be equal. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I kind of
I got him ahead of Jay. Mine is my top 4. I'm gonna tell you my top 4. Now and then I want to know your top 4. My top 4 is Pac, Big, Nas, and Jay.
Pac, Big, Nas, and Jay.
Yep.
Okay. I gotta go with Pac. I'm gonna go with Jay-Z. I'm gonna go with Big. I'm gonna go with Nas. Number 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that, man. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that. If I'm gonna do my starting 5 and my 5th, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. If I gotta go with a number 5 on that, I'm talking about someone who transcended. I'm gonna go with Master P. Let me tell you why.
I'm a Cube guy. I got Ice Cube in my number 5.
Let me say why I go with Master P. When he came out in 99, I'm talking about that No Limit Soldier, all of that. He brought that Southern dirty South, gangsta, all that, man. It changed the whole culture. So I gotta put him up there. You know what I'm saying? And I'm putting him up there again because he changed the whole culture.
He changed the business too. He really did.
The business.
He really did.
He was one of the first rappers to go play NBA ball. He was one of the first rappers to do a movie. You know what I'm saying? Like out of his own pocket though. You know what I'm saying?
He had the label, he had clothes, he had
his own clothes, his own label. So he actually showed us. He actually showed Black people how to own your own stuff, your own brand, how to brand yourself. You know what I'm saying? But
I definitely agree with that. I couldn't.
When you look
I
at
couldn't put
Jay,
him nowhere. If we're talking business, I agree with that. If we're talking music, I couldn't put him nowhere near my top 5.
Well, no, only reason I'm saying that,
I agree.
Only reason I'm saying that is because he was able to. The music was the brand, and the brand was an extension of the music. When we look at artists, when you look at an artist in their entirety, right? You're looking at presentation, appearance, stage presence, right? A lyrical composition, right? You're looking at all these different things. This is what makes an artist, right?
Right.
He had that, but he was ghetto. But no, listen, he was ghetto, which that's where I'm from. I'm from the hood, so I get it. But he was able to brand the hood. Listen, it transcended.
And I give you that. And I mean, look, I'm from the hood too, and I respect his hustle. I just didn't like his bars, man. I didn't like. It was only a handful of songs.
Listen, it wasn't his bars. Nobody was impressed with the bars. They was impressed with the hook. Okay, yeah, hook. The hook is what made No Limit.
Now I tell you though, Body was the truth. When Body came out,
that's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, Body was raw.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, man. Like when you think about, that's what I'm saying. So the reason I put him in the top 5 is because even though he was not as lyrically strong as my top 4, he made up with that, with being able to brand the hood.
I can feel that.
And it was okay to be a part of the hood.
I can feel
you get money. You know what I'm saying? It was okay to, you take a risk by selling dope or whatever you did, but that's what people was doing. And it was embraced not just by the Black culture, but it was embraced by
By everybody,
by everybody, whites, Latinos, you know what I'm saying? So everybody embraced that culture back then, man.
I give you that.
So it's a lot to really dig into, man. And then, I gotta say this, man, before we close Hot Top. I don't know what the hell is going on in DC, but let me say this.
Hey, we got set it up because we got 2 minutes left, so we're gonna have to come back and talk some more about this. But go ahead and set it up.
I don't know what the hell going on in DC, and I want to preface what I'm about to say like this. I do not want any Republican blaming Democrats for what we're getting ready to talk about too. It has nothing to do with it. I promise you, man. If I hear one Republican blaming Democrat, I'm coming for you, okay? Because what I'm about to talk about, what we're getting ready to talk about, is a disgrace. It's a shame before God of what's going on in the urban community, in the urban America, in our nation's capital. I got to talk about it. And I want to say something. Also, Darvio, God forbid, if you ever go, I promise you, I will not do to you what they did to this.
And I got you. I agree. I same way, brother. I ain't gonna let you go out like that.
Yeah, man. Listen. Make sure you guys go subscribe right now to the Jeff Brown Show on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast at. Listen, we got to go pay some bills. I got to talk to y'all about what's going on in DC after this commercial break. We'll be right back.
These days, it seems like everybody's talking, but no one is actually listening to the things they're saying. Critical thinking isn't dead, but it's definitely low on oxygen. Join me, Kira Davis, on Just Listen to Yourself every week as we reason through issues big and small, critique our own ideas, and learn to draw our talking points all the way out to their logical conclusions. Subscribe to Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis, an FCB radio podcast on Apple, on Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Jeff Brown Show.
And we're back. Hey, y'all also want to make sure you guys tune in next Tuesday, the 12th. Myself, along with Coco Brown, actress and comedian, is launching our new IG Live show called WTF, What the F You Say. So we're going to be talking about everything. So, Darby, you got to get on there. Come holler at us on IG as well. It's going to be dope. We're going to have some celebrity friends come on, some guests come on. Even you're going to be, if you are tuned in, we're going to bring you on. We're going to have a good time talking about everything. No holds bar. Nothing's off limits. So make sure you guys go follow my page at Official Jeff Brown Show page right now on IG, or go follow Coco Brown at Coco Brown Funny Mama.
One funny mama.
One funny mama. Say it again, Darvio.
Coco Brown, one funny mama.
Yeah, go follow her right now on IG. And matter of fact, make sure you guys go follow all of the FCB network right now. My man Kingpin, drop your IG handle, bro.
You can follow me at D the Kingpin. That's DTHEKINGPIN. That's Instagram, Twitter, everywhere.
That's right. There you have it, man. So listen. I told y'all as we ended the last segment, our last talk segment, about some troubling things that are going on with dead people in DC.
Lord have mercy.
I remember when a person died, we just recently had at my church, Darvio, Mother Watkins, shout out to the Watkins family. She was the widow of Bishop Watkins, who my spiritual father, Bishop J. Delano Ellis, succeeded.
Oh, wow.
When he passed, his wife stayed with the church. She actually outlived both her husband and Bishop Ellis. She died last week. So big shout out to the Watkins family and that matriarch there. But when you talk about death or somebody dies, okay, you normally take a somber approach because some people psychologically cannot handle a dead body, someone just laying there in a casket, right? Some people are not comfortable talking about death because death is unknown. Now, as far as those that are saved and born again, have Christ in their heart, their faith is the belief that there's life after this, eternal, and an eternal place for them with the Lord, right? And I'm not here to preach, but I'm just really here to give a somber introduction when we talk about death, because I normally don't talk about this, but I gotta talk about it because it seems like urban nights is taking the somberness out of death. When somebody dies, it brings families together, families that's been broken up, divided, people that haven't talked in 20, 30 years, they start talking again. Death makes you reflect on your own personal life. Do you have your business in order? Well, not this group of people. In Washington, D.C., a young rapper passed. His name was, Darby?
They called him, hold on, I got the article right. Gunu. Yep.
Gunu. God rest his soul. But Gunu was on display like no other at the club.
So
all he needed was some 1800 and a bottle of water.
Oh,
and
my
he
goodness.
definitely needed the water.
Right. So let me read this real quick for people who don't know. So this is from the New York Post. Washington, D.C.'s Bliss nightclub has apologized over an appalling spectacle in which the body of slain rapper Gunu was reportedly displayed on their stage at his own funeral. The memorial service took place Sunday, weeks after the rapper was shot dead at 24 years old. Our deepest condolences to Gunu's family, friends, and fans, the venue wrote in a statement, which was shared on Instagram Monday by the Shade Room. Bliss was contacted by a local funeral home to rent out our venue for Gunu's homegoing celebration. Bliss was never made aware of what would transpire. I don't believe that. We sincerely apologize to all those who may be upset or offended. The venue continued. Please keep Gunu's family and friends in your prayers at this difficult time. The statement was posted amid trending Twitter footage that reportedly showed the slain rapper apparently propped up on stage at Bliss nightclub while mourners raved around him like an Irish whale. The hip hopper's corpse was decked out in a hoodie, a blinged out watch, and a crown. A source who attended the public viewing, entitled The Last Show, confirmed that there was a $40 cover charge to enter the venue, the Shade Room wrote in a prior post.
Damn. First of all, what in the hell are we doing in our community where we are paying to go see a dead person? And now we're making it a spectacle? And let me say something else to you, Darby. God rest his soul. They couldn't pull his pants up. They couldn't fasten his belt. Did he have to sag even in death?
Even in death.
I mean, did he really have to go out like that? Did he really have to enter wherever he's going with his pants sagging?
So, Jeff, I don't know if the world has gotten this bad or if we're just old. Because
it's bad.
This is one of the most outrageous things I have ever seen. There are so many things wrong with this. If y'all have seen that video of these people dancing around the corpse of this dead man,
it's hot and he's melting.
Oh my God! And
did you see his mouth?
He was 24 years old. It was already a tragedy. Look at this fool. It was already a tragedy that he died in the first place, being 24 years old and getting shot.
Oh my God.
Then but then you want to make a spectacle out of it on top of that. That is the most ridiculous, outrageous thing I think I've
The
ever
man
seen.
is sagging and he dead, man. They couldn't pull his pants up.
They got designer clothes on him. They put jewelry on him. They put and then propped
like
him
he was
up.
at the club. I told him he was missing with some 1800.
I'm sitting there and then they said when they said this was the homegoing service. This was his funeral.
The preacher. Where was the preacher at?
The preacher was the DJ.
Oh my God. What have this culture come to?
It's embarrassing, man. It's embarrassing. Because then we be the first ones to get mad when people talk about us. But this is embarrassing.
Well, you know what, Darvio? You know who I blame?
Who?
I blame the Republicans for this one, man. For real. Democrats can't take it. The Democrat, hey, take a page out from the GOP. Deny everything. You know, so you know, we're gonna come back and talk about a little bit more later in the show. I do want to talk about that guy down in that representative down there in North Carolina, the orgy guy. So I want to talk a little bit about him
Lord.
too. There's been a lot of news going on, man. Listen, we'll be right back.
Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind the scenes in the entertainment industry? Join me, Victoria Henley from Cycle 19 of America's Next Top Model, for an inside look at fashion shows, concerts, and a wide variety of events throughout the United States, featuring exclusive and insightful interviews with both seasoned and up-and-coming artists. Listen in and subscribe to Backstage Pass with Victoria, an FCB radio podcast on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Jeff Brown Show.
What's going on? And we're back. We're back. Oh my God, what a day of hot topics. So I just want to say again, Darvio, I would never let you go out like that, man. We will give you an honorable service. Make sure you're cool.
Thank you.
You will have on suits, on a suit, and whatever your favorite shoes are.
And the suit pants won't be sagging. And I would not let you. If you go out before me, I would not let you go out like that either.
Yeah, man. That's crazy, man. Listen.
I got a question for you though, Jeff, that I saw
me.
on Instagram. I'm just curious. There was a question that was asked in one of these one of those meme videos. If somebody came to you and said, I'll give you $10 million to snitch on your family, would you do it?
Ooh, 10 million.
10 million. Cash money.
Yeah, I would do it. Take one for the team, man. When you get out, we got you.
I got you.
Take one for the team. I don't believe in snitching, but in this case, snitch. Going down. So don't break the law in front of me. I 10 mil coming. Yeah, don't break no law in front of me. I've been to jail, so I understand. That's the other part about snitching, because I went to prison and somebody told on me, so I get it, and I didn't get no money, and they didn't either. Right. But in this case, it's 10 million.
That's why I wanted to ask you, because
it could change. It could 10 million can change everything.
Yep.
You can't even be mad. You should want to go do the time.
Like I got you when you get out.
Yeah, if you get 10 years, think about it like this. You got $1 million, $1.5 million, or whatever. I'm gonna put $2 million aside for you when you get home. So that way you straight. Think about it. Politicians do it all the time. Corporate people do it all the time. Think about it. Jimmy Haslam, when Flying what's that? Flying J pilot. What's that?
Pilot Flying J. Yeah.
Yeah, pilot. Yeah. Remember when they got investigated?
Yep.
Jimmy Haslam didn't go to jail, but a lot of his executives did, and I bet you they good now. Guess what? It happens like that, man. So shoot, 10 million. I gotta get a deposit first. I can't just give up. I can't, you gotta give me like 5 million. I gotta walk away with something. Right. Because I ain't gonna just tell on you, know what I'm saying? So you gotta give me something up front. I gotta have some type of, and I needed cash. Big bills. Or you can give me, you know what I'm saying? I wanted cash, or you can give me a cashier's check. Cashier's check or cash. That's the only way I'm taking. It's the only way I'm snitching. And I got you.
Got it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so wow. DC, y'all out there wilding, man. Whew. But anyway, I want to talk about this guy,
Patterson Cawthorn. I know the story.
Hey, man. I wanted to talk to you about this because I know your belief, your idea. But one thing I do respect about you, you are for our culture, the Black culture. I do respect that about you. I don't see that a lot in that party, but one thing about you, I will say you are for our community, man. You do a lot of work in the community. You're very involved. When he came out with that, what was your first thoughts?
So I got a couple thoughts. And I mean, and for the record, first of all, I appreciate what you said. And I'm not really, I have my belief system, but I'm not really a big party person because I hate everybody.
Right.
But,
You do. But if you had your choice, you preferably may go right rather than left. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
But I voted for Democrats too. So it just depends on who the candidate is.
I voted for Republican too. I voted for Bush, just so you know, on the record.
Right.
So maybe I should have.
It just depends on the candidate.
I don't know if I should have voted for Bush, but I did.
Anyway, moving past that. So like I said, it just depends on the candidate for me. But when I saw that, I mean, I've been around politicians. I ain't never seen nothing like that. Like what he was saying.
Sniffing cocaine and having
Yeah, I ain't never seen it. I will say this. I've not seen that. I have heard of that. Not the orgy part, but the cocaine part. I have heard of that. So I will say that. I'm not gonna say no names.
So
I'm not gonna say which party.
So you can't confirm. So you can't confirm that some of those activities are true.
Well, I can't confirm nothing. I just know what I've been told.
You can't confirm or deny.
Right, I can't confirm or deny. But the point that I was getting ready to make on that
was Senator Mitch McConnell at any of these parties?
No, not that I'm aware. You stupid. But the point that I'm making is, in my experience with DC, Republican or Democrat, I just view DC as Hollywood for nerds. Like everything that you associate, like all the crazy stuff that they do in Hollywood, in the political world is very similar. So I don't know about the orgy stuff. I ain't heard nothing about that, but nothing would surprise me.
Hey man, I knew he wasn't lying because hey, let me say something. These a lot of these Trump people that supported Donald Trump, and I know a lot of stuff is for them to stay in and then keep their base happy, right? And a lot of them maybe don't even support Trump, but I guess it's a friend. Let's just say that, all right? I'm gonna be fair on it. Nobody says anything when it came to Trump. But when this man said that they was having orgies and sniffing cocaine, man, I ain't never seen a Republican stand up. They even got a bipartisan bill passed, man. That's how bad it was, okay? So,
you stupid.
They finally passed a 100-year bill from Emmett Till. The Emmett Till, congratulations to the government for being able to...
That Tim Scott wrote, by the way, so shout out to Tim Scott.
You know, congratulations to the government, both Dems and Republicans for that. Hey, but they came out with that, man. They like, we don't do that. We're doing this. Hey man, I couldn't stop laughing when I read the article. I'm like, that's what y'all doing. Cutting taxes
Right.
for the rich and having orgies, huh? That's how y'all celebrate, huh?
So I'm not. I like I said that I've never heard that before. The cocaine thing, though, to be honest, I have heard that before.
Wow. But you know what? That's probably why. That's probably why the politicians, not just Republicans, Democrats alike. That's probably why they be so the way they be, man. They might,
What they
might need to be, yeah, high. Goals burning. They got an itch. Scratching it, you know. Can't wait to get out of session.
Man, what? Man, listen. So I don't know about all that stuff, but I can imagine. DC is a wild place. I just put it like
DC might be Las Vegas on the low.
Yeah, just with politicians.
Yeah, with politicians.
I mean, think about it for real. Like, if you ever notice, like the cities that the RNC and the DNC go to, you ever notice how a lot of the news reports and how a lot of the police are like they getting ready for an uptick in prostitution when those events come to their city? Who's paying for prostitutes?
Right, you heard it here first.
You know what I'm saying?
By the kingpin. You heard it here first.
So
you looking for a good time? Hey, listen, if you looking for a good time, go to an RNC convention. You won't go to jail.
DNC.
Or the DNC. Get you some, hey, how you look, hey, you can blow some smoke. You can blow some steam. And get some politics done. At the same time.
It's time to get out of here, man. Wrap this thing up, Jeff.
What did you learn today, man?
I learned that you want your home going to be a party.
Yeah, but what I also learned today is you want yours to be a party too, but we don't want to be standing up there. So listen, hey, make sure you guys, and we don't want to be melting away at the same time.
Lord have mercy.
Hey, listen, yeah, man, that's just crazy. You got to watch the video. Go on Darville's Twitter. Darville, give me your handle real quick.
At D the Kingpin, it's right there. I tweeted it.
Yeah. Yeah, and go to official Jeff Brown Show page. I'll be posting the video as well, so you can check it, look at it. Also, go subscribe on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts on your favorite listening device. Hey, listen, it's been another exciting episode of the Jeff Brown Show. See you till next week. Bye.
The FCB Radio Network. First class broadcasting worldwide.
Home. They say it's where the heart is. They also say it's wherever you make it. They don't say it's where you unload your stuff, get tired halfway through unpacking, use some boxes as furniture, realize your oven mitt's in a box that doubles as a nightstand, don't want to buy a new nightstand, and use a towel as an oven mitt instead. But no matter where you call home, Geico makes it easy to bundle and save on renters and car insurance. Easier than grabbing a piping hot pan with a towel that's a bit too thin and trying to quickly get it to the counter. Ooh, hot, 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 hot.
Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/Joshua Velas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Bellis. I am your host as usual, and obviously, welcome back to the show. Today's episode 213 of the show, and before we get started, we're going to do a house cleaner quick around here because it only makes sense that we do it, so let's just get on with the house cleaning. I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening. It does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly take time out of your days to download these episodes, to share these episodes, to constantly keep letting me know how you feel, whether you like my stupid face or not, because, hey, we're doing a video version this week. What a beautiful thing. So you get to see my face. As you guys can clearly tell, I am growing out my beard even more now, and I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you guys like the beard? Do you think it fits me a little bit better? Do you think it suits a little bit more of a mature look, especially because I'm getting older? I'm crying on the inside that I'm getting older, but that is how the cookie crumbles, my friends. I know it kind of sounds stupid. I know I'm barely just 22, and it's just, man, I'm barely 22, and I already feel like I'm 40. But yeah, but we'll deal with that another time. But thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate you guys constantly keep coming back, and you keep downloading these episodes, you keep sharing them, you constantly keep voting on the topics, you guys keep choosing the topics, since I open it up to you guys to choose what I can talk about. Also, thank you to the Patreon backers as well for supporting the show. You guys are greatly appreciated. I love you guys all to death. But today, my dear listeners and viewers, if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where we like to listen to your podcast, or you're joining us on the YouTube version of the show, where you get to see my lovely, beautiful face, even though probably some of you want to punch me in said face. But what are we talking about today? I think it's kind of interesting because, well, I think this sucker might give it away a little bit what we might be talking about today. And no, before somebody says, holy crap, did you get a PS5? No, I did not get a PS5. I just have a PS5 controller just to play on my PC because my hand issues are slightly getting worse. And this controller just makes it a little bit easier on my hands. But we're essentially talking about the PlayStation, but not the console, more of the software and the services, or the services side of the PlayStation, which we're essentially talking about the new PS Plus tiers. And to me, this has been a very interesting topic. It has sparked tons of debate ever since it was announced, the new tiers, whether it be the pricing scheme, whether it be some specific things mentioned in said tiers about what they offer, what they don't offer. And we're going to talk about those things a little bit because I feel like it's a very important conversation, especially when it comes to the idea of handling the PS3 era. And this has always been a very controversial topic when it comes to how Sony has handled the PS3, when it comes to, legacy of the PS3, the backwards compatibility or the lack of backwards compatibility with the PS3 era. And it only makes sense that this conversation pops up again the second we get a PlayStation Plus refresh and, well, the PS3 is mentioned in those tiers. But let's talk about the tiers real quick. Let's break them down, price scheme, et cetera, et cetera. So the new PS Plus tiers is broken down into 3 new tiers. And the thing that we should keep in mind with all of this, I don't necessarily consider the new tiers a competitor to Game Pass. I think the target audience that they're trying to reach is different, especially with the different value propositions that come with each thing. Game Pass has its own value proposition, while the new PS Plus tiers has their own value propositions. When we talk about the new tiers, we have to acknowledge what each tier represents. We have the Essential tier, which is essentially just your normal PS Plus, your normal just PS Plus tier. That's all it really is, just $60 a year. You can pay the monthly fee. Overall, people are going to say go for the yearly, and that just has your usual, standard benefits that usually come with PS Plus. Then we bump up to Extra, and this is where we start to see some very interesting things where they start to include games that can be downloaded and cloud streamed. We're going to have to keep those words in mind, so keep them in mind. Both PS4 and PS5 games. So essentially that gets added to the tier. And with the PS, bump up from the Essential, so the PS Plus Essential is the basic for $60 a year. The Extra is $100 a year, and then we bump up to the Premium tier, where essentially you get the same benefits of the Extra tier, just with more stuff. And the main stuff that's included is interesting, to say the least. Essentially what they add is native downloads and cloud streamings of PS1, PS2, and PSP games. But they also mentioned that PS3 is included only through cloud streaming, and that would end up running you about $120 a year yearly. For me, I get that the debate of the PS3 and how Sony has handled it, how Sony has treated the PS3 era, let's be real, can be argued pretty piss poor if we're just being objectively honest here. It's not that they want to forget about it. That's not what they're doing. The problem is the architecture of the PS3 has caused many issues, and it's been well documented. It's like I've seen so many conversations that I've seen debates saying that, well, they're having a hard time doing it. It's not realistic or feasible that they're can get an emulation running of a PS3 emulation running on a PS5. There's people that have made clear debates that it's easily possible for Sony to make an emulation of the PS3 running on the PS5. The problem is they just don't want to do it, and they feel that cloud streaming is the better option. And for me, I do agree with the debate that it is possible to do it. I just don't think Sony's putting in the effort to do it. I think they just I wouldn't say it's not that they don't care. I'm not going to say that. I just don't think they see the value in doing it. They probably see more value in doing the cloud streaming. It's just easier, simpler, just running it through data centers. The problem that people have with the PS3 cloud streaming, as we've seen with PS Now, because that's essentially what this new PS Plus subscription is doing, is merging PS Plus with PS Now, is we're essentially getting the same cloud streaming that's already on PS Now. Well, now. And the problem with the cloud streaming is that it has really bad latency. The visual quality is just absolutely terrible. And this is why people have been clamoring for Sony to do proper emulation, especially given the hardware of the PS5. They don't see why it's impossible, or Sony just isn't trying when they have a very capable console of running these things, that you could emulate it, especially because people have made the joke that, like, my brother in Christ, you made the damn system. What do you mean you can't emulate it? Which I think it's always been a very interesting debate. The fact that, we've seen this with Nintendo, where people have joked with Nintendo, like, bro, how is it possible that the company that made the game, that made the console that game was played on, can't even do an emulator right? And homies that have no affiliation, no access to the source code, did a much better job at emulating than Nintendo themselves when it came to dealing with, like, say, the Ocarina of Time and some other N64 games. Because Nintendo, again, is kind of in the same boat as Sony, where emulation, they kind of hate it and they kind of don't want to deal with it. I do at least respect Microsoft in that sense of putting an emphasis on backwards compatibility. Obviously, yes, we have to acknowledge that backwards compatibility is not necessarily a big feature now going forward, that there won't be more games added to it due to licensing agreements and things like that. It just causes some legal issues, if we're just being honest here. Now, for me, I think the pricing is fair. I think the better value, as many people have probably stated, is the extra tier is the most realistic and I think better value of the two. I think premium, the fact that we don't have any information regarding what PS1 games, what PS2 games, what PSP games, what PS3 games, even though the PS3 games, people are assuming that whatever's on PS Now is just the same ones we're going to get. And at the same time, we also think about, like, which PS1, PS2, PSP games are going to be downloadable, which games are going to be only cloud streamed. Because to me, it kind of screams a little bit of a red flag, the fact that we don't know what games, because the service doesn't come out until starting in June when it gets rolled out, say, in Asia, then the United States, and then other countries. To me, I get it. It made sense that Sony was going to do something like this. Like, it's been rumored for a while now that Sony was going to do a refresh because they want a competitor to Game Pass. It just makes logical sense given how Game Pass has been successful, how the numbers are growing, how, it's becoming the best value in gaming, if you want to say that. I know it's a cheesy tagline, but they have a point when they say it. They're not just saying it just to say it. They're saying it because it actually is one of the better values in gaming. The fact that you get access to Microsoft's first-party games day one on a service without having to buy them. So that means you can try them out. And if you like them, hey, you probably want to go out and buy it if you actually tried it out for a month. And, you pay a monthly fee. You get to try them out. And you get access to them day one. So you don't have to go wait in line to play the game. You could just instantly start downloading it and boom, start playing it right then and there. And if you like it, you're probably going to go buy it physically. I'm just being honest. And if you don't like it, hey, you're just like, hey, I tried this game out, didn't like it. Well, delete, move on. That's essentially how people view Game Pass. And at the same time, the fact that it has access to some good third-party games as well. The fact that there's going to be early releases. The fact that, to me, it doesn't surprise me, as I've mentioned this before, that Sony was going to do this. I don't think it caught anybody off guard that Sony was going to do something like this, that they wanted a competitor to Game Pass. It just makes logical sense that they were going to do this. You'd be kind of stupid to say that they weren't going to do this when they had all the reasons in the world to do this. They wanted a piece of that pie because they realized, like, hey, maybe going forward, subscriptions are going to be the way. The future of gaming is subscription based rather than physical sales, because I'm worried about that. Especially, this is the other thing that worries me too, is especially the whole idea of streaming. Yes, I get it. They have these big data centers that, they make custom chips to run these data centers. It just still goes to show that cloud streaming still has a far way to go before we can even consider this the next standard of gaming, that home consoles are dead, that streaming on the cloud will be the future. In the prime reality, this is latency, visual quality. It still hasn't really improved so much. It still doesn't make things better. It doesn't make people feel comfortable going into this cloud streaming direction. There's a reason why Nintendo got so much backlash when how they handled Kingdom Hearts, with the fact that they put some of the biggest Kingdom Hearts games and they're cloud streamed, even though they ran on consoles that were far weaker than the Switch. And the fact that the Switch can't run these games natively, let's be real, homie, we all know what it was. They were just kind of lazy. I know that kind of sounds bad. I'm just being honest with you. The fact that some of the older Kingdom Hearts games ran on weaker hardware than the Switch, yeah, you had no excuse on why you couldn't put these things on the Switch. Like, actually native, like, instead of cloud streaming them. Just being honest here. For me, the concern is still with the PS3 games, especially with the fact that there's a lot of PS3 games that are not able to be, that haven't been pushed over to even the PS4 or even currently the PS5. The fact that a lot of these games cannot be bought, and that's the concern that people have too, is like, why can't I just buy games that I like? Like, if there's a PS3 game I like playing, why can't I just buy this or is it only just going to be locked to streaming it? And this is where some people have issues with the service, is due to the fact that, how's it going to look? How's it going to run? And at the same time, are we eventually maybe going to get an update to it again? Like, maybe like another update where they say, hey, we actually have a PS3 emulator running. And the same thing goes with like the PS1, PS2, and PSP games. Like, which ones are going to be downloadable? Like, that you can actually download and play them and they're not cloud versions. Or which ones are going to be the cloud versions? Is it going to be like an 80-20 split, like 80% being cloud and 20% being download? Like, what is going to be the split? Like, what are we going to see? And at the same time, at $120 a year, it's kind of rough, homie. Like, yeah, you're pushing it. Like, you're definitely pushing it. And at least, yeah, if I did the math correct, I think it should be 120. I might be wrong, but that's the last time I saw it. I saw 120. I don't have my phone on me, so I can't really check, which I know that kind of sounds bad, but it's going to be interesting. To be honest, I don't see it as a competitor to Game Pass. I think Game Pass, especially, this is the main thing too, that people were also mad about, was the fact that PS5 games or PlayStation exclusives will not be day one on the new service, or specifically the premium tier. I think that would have made a little bit of logical sense, especially if you want to push people up to that premium echelon, to put the PS exclusives on there day one. I get it. I understand that Sony's like, look, this hurts our business model. We want people to buy these games because if they buy these games, they're able to fund our projects. So we can keep making these, because obviously the price of development of these first party exclusives are starting to get more and more expensive. So Sony obviously wants to get as much money as they can out of you. To be honest, I think it was kind of stupid not to do the PS1 exclusive. Like, I understand how they work over there at Sony. They're obviously, those homies are crunching numbers hard. They're really trying to think about every possible scenario of how they can milk you suckers dry. Prime example, they kind of got $60 out of me for this damn controller. But it's one of those things where I think it would have been a good idea, especially with the fact that knowing that your competition, and some people are like, well, what about the quality of those first party exclusives? Like, they're clearly not as good. And at the same time, if we're comparing companies who got, more money in the bank, clearly Microsoft has more money than Sony. They obviously can take a loss while doing this. Like, the thing with the Xbox brand is that, yes, they also have one of the largest companies in the world backing them and funding them, and Sony, is not yes, they are big. They ain't Microsoft levels of big with how much cash they got, especially the fact that they just bought Activision Blizzard for $70 billion in cash, $80 billion in cash. Like, That wasn't like stocks. No, homies. They gave them straight cash. They gave them fat Benjamins, stacks, racks of Benjamins. So this is the type of company we're dealing with here. Obviously, they can take a loss, so it makes sense why they're okay with putting the first-party games on there day one, since, hey, they're okay with taking a loss at, with the hope and expectation that eventually it'll generate profit. That's the hope and expectation with Game Pass, that eventually it will start generating a net profit for Microsoft, and, well, then they'll just hit the ground running. With Sony, they just don't feel comfortable, and they're just not really at that point where it makes logical sense to do that. For me, I think the PS3 emulation should have happened. I think if there was a time that Sony would have done it, this would have been the best time to do it. I think Sony really dropped the ball when it comes to mishandling, and I understand that the PS3 architecture is different. I understand that it was, when they transitioned from the PS3 to the PS4, that was one of the debates that they had, which was, we understand that changing the architecture is going to cost us something. And in this case, it was the backwards compatibility with the PS3, but they were okay with it because, well, we saw how good the PS4 sold. It just sucks that Sony keeps saying that, look, we just can't figure it out. And a lot of people are like, well, what do you mean you can't figure it out? You made the damn thing. What do you mean you can't figure this out? Like, you can't tell me that homies that, just do stuff on their computer on their free time were able to figure this out, but the company that has the source code, made the original console, knows everything about the console, has the blueprint, schematics, everything, can't figure out how to emulate this damn thing. Well, homies in their bedrooms can figure this out. Like, come on, bro. Like, come on, don't give me this crap. Sony knows they can do it, they just don't want to do it, and it sucks because we just have to deal with it. But at the end of the day, I think the new tiers are very interesting. I think it just comes down to seeing what games they put. Like, we really have to see what did they put, because it's easy to say, oh, over 700 games, over 300 partners are partnering with us to put games on this service. Like, okay, that's all fine and dandy. What games did you put? Like, if you put a bunch of trash on there, like, it don't matter how many games you got if most of them are doo-doo-dah cheeks. You get them? Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like, if these games are trash, bro, they're trash. Like, it don't matter. But I'm interested to see how this turns out. I've said this a little bit too, like it's kind of funny. I have the PS5 controller, so if I ever am able to get my hands on a PS5, the only reason I would be to play Final Fantasy VII Remake. Well, not just part 1, but eventually once part 2 comes out, I still would wait until they make the Masters Collection, which would be like part 1 and 2 together. That would be the one that I'd buy, especially if they put them on one disc. Ooh. You can bet your sweet butt cheeks on buying that. Hell yeah. I'm going to be like, just take my money, bro. Just take my money. And I got another controller now, so, I'll have 2. But at the end of the day, let me know. Do you guys have a PS5? What do you guys think of the new tiers? Do you feel like yay, nay? Like, Sony dropped the ball? Do you think Microsoft is still killing it with Game Pass? Do you think Game Pass is even a good value to begin with? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, or just hit me up on my social medias, because you guys seem to do that every time I post an episode, and whether you like them or not, you guys will obviously let me know, because I check my messages. But let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys again for just taking time every day to listen to this episode, to watch this episode. It really just means a lot to me that you guys constantly make time to just let me talk, let me ramble. I wouldn't say ramble, but at least have an insightful conversation about these things, whether it be trends in technology, business, the video game industry, especially the real talks. Like, a lot of you have reached out to me and told me you've felt very encouraged about a lot of the Slice of Life episodes, and with just giving some advice with dealing with certain things that I've been through, just things that people just go through in general on an everyday basis. To be honest, I've been incredibly encouraged and humbled by it. To me, thank you guys so much for that. I really do appreciate it, because I do this not only because I love doing what I'm doing when it comes to doing the show, but at the same time, I love interacting with people. I love being able to help people, to be able to share stories with people, to get to understand people, where they're coming from with their different stories. Because I've always felt that the best way to get to know somebody is when you share stories. That's when you really get to know somebody. And whether those stories be talking about video games, whether it be talking about tech, whether it be talking about business trends, or just talking about life and doing life together. To me, all this is fun. All this is rewarding, and I couldn't do this without you guys. But as always, guys, I love you guys to death. I hope you guys have a wonderful week and weekend. Please, guys, be safe. Don't do anything dumb. The world is still a weird place out there, so let's just continue to be kind, courteous, and take care of those around us. And as always, guys, don't do anything dumb. I love you guys to death. I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful weekend and week. Keep staying awesome, guys. If you're in college, keep crushing it, guys. We're almost at the very end of the semester. Just keep pushing. If you're working a 9 to 5, keep working hard. I wouldn't say try to keep a smile on your face while working, but try to be a little bit more hopeful and optimistic and realize that, hey, everything you're doing now has a purpose. Everything you're doing has there's a reason why you're doing what you're doing. Everything has a purpose. I would say every place that we are placed in, there's always a constant opportunity to help somebody, to make somebody's day, whether it be a cashier, whether it be a CEO of a company. Your responsibilities, while different, at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't have an impact on somebody's life. No matter you're a cashier or you're waiting tables or you're the CEO or an owner of a business, you can always have an impact on somebody's life. So that's why it's just a matter of perspective, and being grateful for everything that we have and not being bitter about what we don't have. But as always, guys, be safe. Love you guys to death. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.